Maria Sharapova'yı dünya sıralamasında zirveye taşıyan Koç, tenisin gündemini NTV'de değerlendirdi. Rus tenisçiyle 8 sene birlikte çalıştığı serüvende 3 Grand Slam şampiyonluğunun mimarı olan Michael Joyce, sonraki yıllarda Victoria Azarenka ve Jessica Pegula gibi yıldızlarla çalıştıktan sonra şu anda Ashlyn Kruger'ı çalıştırıyor.
We have a very special guest today, former ATP player and now a tennis coach, Michael Joyce. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You have worked with stars like Maria Sharapova, Victoria Azarenka and Jessica Pegula. Now you are currently working with Ashlyn Kruger. So you work and travel all the time. How is your life going on tour?
Yeah, it's interesting. The last couple of years, I spent a lot more time home than I have in a long time. But then I realized that I kind of miss the competition. I think my best work is done on the road, and I think that some of these players, when I start working them when they're young, they've had good success, and so Ashlyn's a girl that I worked with a lot when she was from about 16 to 18, and she's 19 now. I had to take a year off from working with her. But I'm excited to kind of be back on tour.
Joyce, Novak Djokovic'in Grand Slam sayısını rahatlıkla 30'a çıkarabileceğini düşünüyor.
Novak Djokovic won his 24th Grand Slam title and equaled the record of Margaret Court. He is also the player with the most Grand Slam victories in the Open era. So I would like to hear your opinions on Novak and how far do you think he can go?
You know, it's interesting. Novak's always been one of my favorite players. When I coached Maria years ago, it's a funny fact that when Maria actually won Australian Open, I think it was 2008. It was actually the first year that Novak won his first Grand Slam, and they won Australian Open together. And they were pretty good friends, and so I knew Novak quite a bit when he was younger, and I always liked him as a person and his game, and to see how he's evolved over all these years and what he's accomplished is absolutely incredible. I also feel that he takes such great care of his body, and he's still looks in phenomenal shape. And what I actually read the last day or two that he wants to play the Olympics in Los Angeles, which is, I think, 2028. So he's looking like he wants to play another 5 years. I think he could win easily another 6 or 7 slams, which is incredible.
Djokovic'e tek tehdidin Carlos Alcaraz olduğunu söyleyen deneyimli antrenöre göre bu ikilinin rekabeti birkaç sezon daha devam edecek.
With Federer retiring and Nadal having troubles with injuries, I was wondering what might happen in men's tennis. But Alcaraz came on the scene and showed he is ready to face Djokovic. Despite the 16 years age gap between them, they have a very competitive rivalry. And what do you expect from these two going forward? And how long do you think this rivalry might last?
Well, I mean, I feel like Alcaraz is obviously he beat Novak at Wimbledon. I think the thing that he showed that was the most impressive, besides the fact that he's an amazing player and such an all-court player, was that his maturity for being, 20 years old or 19 years old, that he was able to stay mentally with Novak for the 5 sets. And actually beat him, and then that match they had in Cincinnati was incredible too. So right now he looks like the only kind of player to me who is a threat to Novak later in the tournaments. I mean, you have Sinner and you have Tsitsipas and these guys, but I feel like those two have showed that they're obviously 1 and 2 for a reason. And it's amazing. Wow, I think it's going to be a pretty good rivalry for the next couple of years. I think it's all going to depend on Novak, how long he wants to play. I mean, and also the fact that Alcaraz is so good is probably making Novak hungry to keep training and playing. And then it's going to be one of these guys like Sinner or Rune possibly, who has to come in to kind of be the next one. But in some ways, I feel like Novak's almost, I don't want to say easier, but I feel like he can almost win slam. Like right now, I feel like he's that Alcaraz is the only one he has to really kind of worry about, where maybe like 10 years ago, he had to worry about Federer, Nadal, you know, whatever. So I feel like that's probably motivating him that he's going to go into Australia as a huge favorite along with Alcaraz, and they both have to get to the finals to play. So right now, I think that's a pretty healthy rivalry, probably going into next year for sure.
İlk Grand Slam şampiyonluğunu kazanan Coco Gauff'la daha önce çalışma şansı yakalayan Joyce, genç yıldızın önümüzdeki yıllarda kadın tenisinin en iyilerinden biri olacağına inanıyor.
On the women's side, the world knew about Coco Gauff when she was just 15 years old at Wimbledon after defeating Venus Williams. She is now 19 and a Grand Slam champion. So, what have you observed about her improvements over the years?
Yes, well, when Coco was 14, actually, right before I started working with Vika, I actually worked with Coco for a couple months, just like a couple times a week. I was in between jobs, between working with Pagula, and I was going to work with Vika, and she was coming off having a baby. And so I had to wait a couple months, and I remember I was giving Coco like lessons like twice a week for like 2 or 3 months. And at 14, I was like, this girl's going to be amazing. Not just the fact of her tennis, but she was so hungry, and she was very mature for her age, and you could tell she loved the fighting and competing, and obviously she did amazing with the next couple years. So her fight, her will to compete, to improve, none of that stuff surprises me. I think obviously when she won the tournament in Washington D.C. after losing early at Wimbledon, in some ways maybe that loss at Wimbledon took a little pressure off her, because you have to imagine how much pressure she's had, because she's been, you know, kind of like anointed as the next champion from 15, 16 years old. And, you know, that's not just a lot of pressure, but, you know, everybody forgets in some cases how young she is. So I think when she lost early at Wimbledon, she probably took a little pressure off. She started to work with some new coaches and made some changes within her team. And then I think the confidence of winning Washington and then Cincinnati led into the Open. Even though she struggled a little bit the first couple rounds, as the tournament went on, I think, you know, she got better and better. And I think that's going to help her going forward, that, you know, winning that takes winning your first slam, it takes pressure off you. Then you have the pressure of backing it up. So there's always pressure there, but she showed herself that she can do it. And she's such a great athlete that I can't imagine her not being one of the top players for years to come.
Joyce, mental sorunlarını aşıp kadın tenisinin zirvesine yerleşen Aryna Sabalenka hakkında da konuştu.
Last year, Sabalenka was calling herself the double fault queen, but this year she reached at least semi-finals at every Grand Slam, including winning the Australian Open and the final at US Open. Today, she became the 29th number one in the history of WTA. What changes do you think she has made physically and mentally to reach this level?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved the way that she plays and competes, and you know, I know a lot of people that are close to her, and she also has that same. I mean, these champions, you know, it's more than just about tennis. They want to win. You know, they want to win the titles, and you know, no matter how much money they make, no matter how much stuff. So, you know, sometimes that drive to win is what makes them great, but it also, I don't want to say choke, but, you know, she put herself in situations where she could win the tournament and fell at the final hurdle, let's say, or whatever, because of nerves or stress or whatever. And I think when you keep putting yourself there, eventually you're going to break through. Obviously, she did that in Australia. Now she's #1, so that takes pressure off because she's reached #1. But, you know, these girls, the women's game is wide open right now, I think. I don't really think you have, besides Iga pretty much dominated the last couple years. And, you know, obviously she could come back stronger. But right now the women's game's pretty open. So I think, you know, girls like Sabalenka, the double faults, I think, was, again, a mental thing. I'm sure she made some changes. I know they talked about a biomechanic serve coach and this and that, which, but not too long ago, everybody was saying that Coco needs to change her forehand and change her grip. And so you have to be careful with making huge changes. A lot of times it's, especially when you're already really good, you got to be, have the right coaches, the right people around to maybe make some adjustments, but not huge changes. And I think a lot of it comes from the confidence. And Sabalenka got over that hurdle of the double faults, and obviously that carried her to help her become number one. So it's interesting, but when you have that drive, like those girls do, you're going to put yourself in situations to win more slams. I'm sure she will as well.
Like you said, consistency has been a problem on the women's side.
Yeah.
But now we have Iga Świątek, Aryna Sabalenka, Elena Rybakina, and now Coco Gauff. It seemed like they can dominate the tour for a long time. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I do agree that, it's in general, my opinion is that I don't feel like the top of the game is in some ways as strong as it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago, when you had Vika and Maria and Serena and Henin and Clijsters, but the depth of the game is probably tougher. Girls ranked 80 or 90 are better than they were 10 years ago. And so I think that's also why you see more upsets, and you see people breaking through that maybe you haven't heard of before or isn't a household name. But those girls at the top, obviously those 4 or 5 girls that are up there for a reason, and they are the most consistent. But I still think you're going to see some other girls popping up. This girl, Andreeva or something, 16, she's ranked 15. I think there's a good group of young girls that are going to challenge those girls as well. But, those girls have obviously proven that they're there for a reason. They've been there for a while. But I think it's interesting right now because I do think there's room to have a much stronger top 10. Let's say if you look at the top 10, there's 4 or 5 girls in the top 10 that really have had bad years, and once the points and the rankings all settle at the end of the year, a girl like Garcia or even Sakari or these girls are going to actually drop quite a bit in the rankings, unless they just win everything the rest of the year. But I think that's something we didn't see so much 10 years ago. We saw like a top 10 or top 12 that was there consistently, and they all kind of challenged each other. Right now we have maybe 3 or 4 girls that challenge each other, and then we have a lot more challenges earlier in the tournament. And so it's an interesting time for the women for sure, and everybody's pretty young. Really, look how young Coco is. Sabalenka's still young, Iga's young. So I think the consistency of those girls over the next maybe 5-10 years will show if we can have like the rivalries like we do with the men.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Michael.
Always a pleasure. It's great talking to you.